Hi, I'm Grace. They used to call me the family pet. Cute, quiet, obedient, always around when they needed something signed, paid, or fixed. I thought I was being supportive. Turns out, I was just being used. My sister forged my name on business loans. My mother called it keeping things in the family. But when I uncovered a 12-year trail of betrayal, and even my niece's college funds being rerouted, I had to ask myself, was I family to them? Or just a convenient signature? Spring in Seattle had a way of tricking you. The sky that morning was unnaturally clear, a rare shade of blue that fooled me into leaving my jacket in the car. I remember stepping onto the backyard deck of my mother's home, the smell of lemon bars and honey ham greeting me like a memory I hadn't missed until just then. There were folding tables stretched across the grass, white plastic chairs already half filled with relatives I hadn't seen since Christmas. I carried a bottle of Pinot Noir under one arm, a small gift bag dangling from the other wrist, something for my nephew, probably a puzzle set he'd pretend to like. "Grace!" my mother called out, brushing past me with a tray of deviled eggs. She kissed my cheek but didn't stop walking. "Hi, Mom," I said, awkwardly standing there holding the wine. I waited, but she was already halfway back to the kitchen. Verity, on the other hand, was magnetic. She always had been. She stood in the center of the crowd, laughing loudly, draped in a pastel sweater that somehow matched the napkins. Her husband, Owen, hovered nearby, always just out of the camera frame, but never out of control. People flocked to her, like she was the main course, and we were just side dishes. "Gracie," Verity sang, arms outstretched. She gave me an air kiss, then whispered as we hugged, "Glad you could make it. Mom was starting to worry you'd ghost us again." I let out a tight chuckle, pretending I hadn't heard the dig. "Wouldn't miss it." I found a seat at one of the tables near the garden, arranging the gift on the table like it mattered. My cousin Lisa was already there with her toddler, nodding at me with that look people give when they're halfway through gossip but pretending to include you. The music from the Bluetooth speaker was soft jazz, the kind that fades into the background of polite conversations. Then came the toast. Verity stood, glass in hand, and tapped a spoon against it dramatically. "Before we cut the cake, I just want to say how grateful I am for this family. We're not perfect, but we're consistent. And some of us," she paused, smiling directly at me, "are adorably loyal, like a golden retriever." Laughter. "Seriously, though," she continued, "Grace has always been our little family pet. Cute, dependable, always around but never causing a fuss." More laughter. Someone near the grill added, "Yeah, like a mascot." I smiled. That frozen, polite kind of smile you rehearse in bathroom mirrors before job interviews. My hands rested in my lap, clenched under the table. My cousin's wife giggled, and her toddler clapped like we were doing a show. My stomach tightened. I reached for the wine, pouring myself a glass, careful not to spill. No one noticed the way my hand trembled, or maybe they did and mistook it for poor coordination. It wouldn't be the first time. I wanted to believe it was just a joke, a bad one, that maybe I was overreacting. But the way everyone laughed, like it was some unspoken truth, cut deeper than any joke should have. Later, while we were clearing the plates, I approached Mom near the buffet table. She was rearranging Tupperware lids like it was a jigsaw puzzle. "Hey, I was thinking," I started, keeping my tone casual, "about Grandma's estate. Maybe I could help organize the legal stuff. I have some contacts." Mom didn't look up. She just patted my hand lightly. "Sweetheart, that's not something you need to worry about. Let your sister handle it." That was it. No discussion, no follow-up, just a dismissal, wrapped in sweetness. I stood there a moment longer, then nodded. "Of course," I whispered. I turned away, pretending to refill my cup while inside, something shifted. This wasn't new. This wasn't a surprise. It was a pattern I'd ignored for years because it was easier than confronting it. Verity got the decisions. I got the applause after the fact. On the drive back to Portland, I kept the radio off. The silence felt necessary, like I was finally listening to a conversation I'd been avoiding with myself. I started listing things in my head, things I had paid for, supported, backed, or fixed in the last 5 years. Verity's baby shower venue deposit. The second refrigerator Mom needed after her old one gave out. The emergency vet bill for Lisa's dog that mysteriously landed on my Venmo. All little things. All temporary help. All me. You don't notice how much you carry until someone keeps handing you more. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. It was titled, Family Contributions, Not That Anyone Asked. Line by line, I added numbers, names, and dates. I didn't even need to dig through receipts. I remembered every transaction. Not because I wanted credit, but because every one of them came with the same casual expectation that I'd always be there to pick up the pieces. As I was about to shut my laptop, I opened my phone, scrolling through old texts. I was looking for something. I didn't know what. Maybe validation. Maybe proof that I hadn't imagined all of it. Then I saw it. A message from Verity, dated last June. Hey, can you co-sign something for me? Just a formality, nothing big. You won't be responsible for anything, I promise. My finger hovered over the message. That wasn't the first time Verity called me something demeaning. But this time, I decided not to let it slide. I woke up before the sun had fully broken through the blinds, the room still carrying that dim bluish haze of morning indecision. My head ached, not from wine, but from the weight of last night's smile, that carefully rehearsed, socially acceptable smile I'd worn like armor. I tossed the covers back and shuffled into the kitchen, barefoot, seeking caffeine and something grounding. The coffee machine sputtered to life with a mechanical cough as I leaned against the counter, my thumb mindlessly scrolling through old messages. There it was, tucked between a text about a birthday cake recipe and a reminder to bring napkins to Easter brunch, Verity's message from last June. Hey, can you co-sign something for me? Just a formality, nothing big. You won't be responsible for anything, I promise. At the time, I hadn't thought twice. I remembered signing something, on the patio at her house, I think, while she was juggling the grill and talking to two people at once. She'd handed me a clipboard and said, just scribble at the bottom. You don't need to read it, it's just to finalize the lease. I remember laughing, saying, do I need a notary too? And she'd waved her hand like I was being dramatic. But now, that memory settled into my chest with a chill. I stood still, coffee in hand, heart thudding at a realization I didn't want to believe. How many things had I just scribbled on over the years? Back at the table, I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking portal. It had been a while since I checked anything beyond balances. I clicked into the transaction history. As I scrolled, something caught my eye, a wire transfer flagged as joint property closing. That phrase meant nothing to me. It was dated 2 months ago. The amount? Substantial, high enough to sting, low enough to fly under the radar if you weren't paying attention. I opened another tab and began cross-referencing dates with messages. Another transfer. Another reference. Slowly, pieces clicked together. A pattern. Payments. Fees. Fees again. The property I'd never seen. The renovations I'd never approved. My name. My credit. It wasn't just occasional help. It was structure. It was systems built on my silence. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered after the third ring. Hi, sweetheart. Everything all right? I was looking at some transactions this morning, I started, keeping my voice measured. There were a few things I didn't recognize. Real estate stuff. Oh, she said, too quickly. I think that was the rental Verity and Owen were getting involved in. Remember the lake property? No, Mom, I don't. Because no one told me I was involved. She paused. Well, we just thought you'd be okay with it. You always are. That sentence. Casual, convenient, weaponized. I didn't even respond right away. I just sat there, staring at the counter. You're still there? She asked. I'm here, I said, but I wasn't really. A ping cut through the line. I heard it on her end, not mine. What was that? I asked. Oh, nothing, she mumbled. I didn't push, not yet. But I knew. That was a group chat notification, and I wasn't in it. After we hung up, I went digging. It wasn't hard. A few clicks later, I found it, an open browser window saved in a family Google account we all used once upon a time to coordinate holiday recipes. Grace Bank. That was the name of the group. Grace Bank. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened that spreadsheet again, the one I'd dusted off the night before. This time, I added a new tab. I labeled it Legal Notes. I began inputting each date, amount, recipient, and any attached documentation I could find. I scanned texts, emails, voicemail transcripts. I backed it all up into a folder I titled Financial History, Quinn Family. I sat back, letting the air settle around me. It wasn't about being dramatic. It wasn't about revenge. It was about math. Math didn't lie. Boundaries aren't walls. They're fences. And fences? Well, fences make good neighbors. And maybe, just maybe, they make better families too. The question surfaced, calm and clear for the first time. What if I stopped saying yes? It felt less like rebellion and more like remembering who I was before I learned to flinch. That evening, as I was cleaning up dinner, my phone lit up again. A new message from Verity. "Hey, can you sign something quick? It's for a new car loan. Just a formality, I promise." I didn't respond. I stared at the screen, let the glow sink into my skin, and felt something inside me finally start to settle into place. Not hard or bitter, just solid. That moment wasn't anger. It was clarity. And it came with a list I was finally ready to write. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to replay the weekend in my head, but memories are stubborn like that. They don't wait for permission. Every joke, every shrug, every time someone said, "Grace will understand," came rushing back like a reel on loop. I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. This pattern didn't begin at that brunch. It had been building quietly for years. Verity's jokes had always been clever, polished, sharp enough to cut, but packaged well enough to pass as humor. At birthdays, she'd say things like, "Grace always brings the same gift, herself." At family cookouts, when someone asked who organized the sides, she'd flash a smile and say, "Grace doesn't cook, she funds." People laughed. So did I. But lying there, I connected the dots, and they formed something I hadn't wanted to see before. It wasn't teasing. It was narrative control. They weren't asking. They were training me to comply. I reached over to my nightstand and grabbed my phone, tapping open the Notes app. My fingers hovered for a moment before I typed a single line. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. A quote I remembered from Brené Brown. I wasn't looking for kindness anymore. I was looking for clarity. So I got out of bed, pulled on my robe, and sat at the kitchen table. The only sound was the hum of the fridge and the occasional pop from the baseboard heater. I opened my laptop, clicked on Google Docs, and titled a new document. Family Financial Interactions. It started as a list, but within minutes, it became a narrative. Bullet point after bullet point. Baby shower contributions. Emergency flight for Aunt Sheila. The deposit for the wellness cafe. I remembered every transaction because none of them were ever followed by thank yous. They just disappeared into a fog of assumed generosity. I paused, staring at the cursor. Then another memory surfaced. Brunch at Verity's last fall. She'd been running around organizing catering while Owen played DJ with a Bluetooth speaker. She came over, clipboard in hand. "Can you just sign this real quick?" she asked, sliding it under my wineglass. "It's for insurance. They just need all family members listed as emergency contacts." I remember laughing. "Isn't that overkill?" "Just sign it," she said. "Trust me." And I had. I trusted her. Curious, I opened my email and searched for anything around that date. My heart kicked up a gear when I saw the attachment. A PDF titled Quinn Collective Lease Agreement. I clicked it open. My name, not listed as emergency contact, listed as co-signer, for a business lease. I leaned back in my chair, the familiar cold settling over my shoulders. This wasn't a gut feeling anymore. This was ink on paper, legal, binding. It wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't exaggerating. This was real. The next day, I dug deeper. Not out of spite, but because I needed the full picture. I needed to know just how much of me they'd spent without asking. The cafe had been Verity's passion project. I'd helped with the startup costs, $15,000 wired over 3 payments. She'd always said, "We're building this together." So I went to the state's business registration portal and looked up the LLC. Owner, Verity Hawthorne. That was it. No mention of me. No co-founder. No silent partner. No trace. I stared at the screen for a long time. I'd always said I didn't care about credit, and I hadn't, until I realized that being invisible isn't humility, it's erasure. I thought about every article I'd read about narcissistic siblings, about how golden children don't always come wrapped in arrogance. Sometimes they come dressed in charm. I closed the tab and whispered to myself, I am done disappearing. I started another list. This one wasn't about money. It was about power. All the ways I'd given mine away in small, quiet increments. Then I opened a blank email. To Verity. Subject, lease review. I typed, before I sign anything else, I need to review the lease you submitted last year. I hovered over the send button, then I deleted it. Instead, I opened a new tab and searched, financial attorneys in Portland. Not because I wanted a fight, but because I wanted a firewall. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about saving myself. That evening, I poured myself a glass of water and sat back on the couch, exhausted but anchored. My laptop chimed. A new email. It was from Verity. A group email. Subject line, family strategy meeting. Let's all get on the same page. The street was too quiet when I pulled up in front of Verity's house, a perfect 2-story sitting smug behind a row of manicured hedges. Every car I recognized was already parked, lined like soldiers on parade. I deliberately parked a little farther away, needing the short walk to finish rehearsing the version of myself I intended to bring inside. I rang the doorbell 5 minutes after the designated time, on purpose. Owen opened the door with a practiced smile, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to say he was casual, but his eyes had the alertness of someone expecting a performance. We're just waiting on you to start, he said, stepping aside. Of course you are, I murmured, walking in. The living room was staged like a networking event. Wine glasses already filled, place cards at the dining table, a printed agenda resting neatly in front of every chair. The soft hum of jazz played through a Bluetooth speaker, familiar, rehearsed. Even the scent in the air, vanilla with a hint of citrus, felt artificially welcoming. Marjorie was arranging a cheese plate near the center of the table. She looked up with the kind of smile that held boundaries. Sweetheart, you made it. I brought nothing, I said flatly. Verity, in her favorite ivory wrap blouse, was already seated at the head. Her manicured fingers tapped rhythmically against her water glass, eyes scanning everyone's faces before finally settling on mine. Well, she said with a performative sigh, let's begin. The first few minutes were polite. They talked about who'd be bringing what to the church fundraiser, how Cousin Rick's back was acting up again, and how Marjorie thought about redoing the guest bathroom. Neutral beige this time. Then Verity cleared her throat. Let's talk structure, she began, adjusting the folder in front of her like a news anchor on camera. We all need to pull our weight. Grace, your flexibility is key here. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Marjorie chimed in, too sweetly. Your sister has been doing so much lately. This family wouldn't function without her. We just need your signature to settle a few things legally. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a cream-colored folder. Owen passed it down the table, and I opened it slowly. It was a property consolidation agreement. Pages of fine print and blanks already filled, my name, listed as a secondary lien holder. No one had looked at me directly while they passed it down. No one asked. They assumed I would fold like I always had. I flipped to the signature page. No discussion, no preamble, just the end, ready to be inked. I looked around the table. Not one face seemed surprised. That was the worst part. The anticipation in their posture told me everything. This moment had been planned without me. Just one question, I said, voice steady. Who prepared this document? Owen cleared his throat. We worked with someone in Verity's office. And I'm supposed to just sign it? It's just a formality, Verity said, as if reciting from a script she'd grown too comfortable with. It protects all of us. Does it? I asked, flipping back a few pages. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like it only protects you. Verity leaned back, crossing her arms. Grace, let's not complicate things. You're the one with the pretty face. Let us handle the legal side. Laughter. Real, echoing laughter from two of our aunts and even Marjorie, who covered her mouth like she was surprised by her own amusement. I sat still, my hand tightening around the stem of my wine glass. A memory surged. 25, a corporate dinner, a manager calling me decorative. I'd laughed then too, I didn't now. I said nothing, but I looked down at every paper, mentally noting the phrasing, the signatures, the inconsistencies. I wasn't just observing, I was documenting. No one noticed the shift in my posture, but I felt it. Finally, I closed the folder. I'll take this home, I said, stacking the papers neatly. I don't sign things I haven't read. Verity rolled her eyes. It's just a formality, Grace. Then there's no harm in reviewing it thoroughly, I said. The room fell silent. No one knew what to do with my tone. It wasn't combative, it was clear. And clarity, I'd come to learn, was the one thing they didn't know how to manage. Owen leaned forward, attempting to bridge the gap. We're just trying to keep everything in the family. Isn't that what you've always wanted? No, I replied. That's what you've always needed me to believe. I stood, calmly gathering my bag. My chair scraped gently against the hardwood floor, the sound louder than any of their murmurs. As I walked toward the front door, Marjorie called after me. Her voice was soft, but pointed, dipped in the guilt only mothers know how to wield. Please don't make this difficult, honey. We just need you to be agreeable like always. I paused, hand on the doorknob, heart steady, but I didn't look back. I sat alone at my dining table, the so-called family agreement spread before me like a disassembled weapon. Verity's signature was already there, her handwriting exaggerated and confident, like she thought that made it official. Owen's initials littered the margins. Marjorie had included a post-it note in her careful cursive. Let's just keep this simple, darling. I took a red pen from the drawer, not to sign, to dissect. Line by line, I marked sections that exposed me, paragraphs about shared liability, clauses suggesting financial obligation by familial relation. It wasn't just a co-signature, they had me listed as a guarantor. If something went wrong, I would be the first to bleed. No wonder they smiled when I walked in. That dinner wasn't a meeting, it was a setup. I leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. It was quiet in my apartment, save for the tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the fridge. The silence was comforting. It didn't require anything from me. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. Do you know a good financial lawyer in Portland? I typed to an old college friend who'd gone corporate. She responded within 5 minutes. Yes, very discreet. You want an intro? I replied with a thumbs up. I wasn't ready to speak, but I was ready to act. The next day, I pulled out the manila folders I kept in a drawer labeled just in case. Years of receipts, Venmo screenshots, PayPal confirmations, old check copies. I had them all. They never knew I kept records because I never said no. Each transaction was tagged and noted. Verity's business account, Marjorie's roof repair, Owen's failed landscaping venture. I built a digital folder titled Non-Reimbursed Financial Aid, Grace Quinn. When I met with the attorney, Ms. Linder, sharp-eyed, all business, she didn't blink as I slid the folder across the table. I want legal distance, I told her. I need to protect my credit, my name, and my future. She nodded. You've kept better documentation than half my clients, but you should know, if you signed power of attorney forms in the past, even informally, we'll need to revoke them. I thought back to the brunch, the clipboard, Verity's voice. Just scribble, Grace. It's for the insurance. They didn't ask, I murmured. They assumed. Ms. Linder tilted her head. And that's where you draw the line? No, I said. That's where I build the wall. That weekend, as I cleaned my inbox, I saw a new Facebook post from Verity. A smiling photo of her and Marjorie at a spa, wrapped in towels, holding glasses of cucumber water. Caption, thanks to Mom for the surprise weekend. I blinked. Surprise. I opened my banking app. The automatic $800 transfer I sent to Marjorie every month for health expenses, medication, and groceries had processed 2 days prior, the same day as that photo. Of course, not betrayal, just condescension. I remembered the year I canceled my vacation because Marjorie had a scare. I'd used my refund to cover unexpected expenses. That expense was now tagged on social media with a heart emoji and no mention of me. I didn't cry. I didn't comment. I closed the app and opened a blank Word document. The top line read, "Financial disengagement terms." I wrote a draft, read it aloud. Moving forward, no agreements, verbal or implied, are to be considered valid unless in writing and co-signed. All familial financial interactions shall be subject to formal review. This applies retroactively and in perpetuity. I didn't send it to them, not yet. I sent it to Ms. Linder, marked "for record only." Then I went to the mirror. I looked tired, but not fragile. "You're not cold," I whispered. "You're clear." Sunday night, just as I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. Verity, then Owen, then Marjorie. I didn't answer. They didn't call again. Just a photo, a group shot. Everyone smiling. Champagne flutes raised. Owen with one arm around Marjorie. Verity in the middle, grinning like she won. No words, no caption, just a picture. That picture wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder. Stay in your place. But I had no intention of staying anywhere I wasn't seen. The morning after their so-called strategy dinner, I opened my eyes to an unusual stillness, the kind that hums around you before reality starts pouring in. I reached for my phone with the hope of avoiding emails, but the lock screen glowed with a single message. It was from Verity. There was no text, just a photo. I tapped it open and sat up without realizing it. There they were. Verity, Marjorie, Owen, and 2 cousins who hadn't texted me in months. All dressed up, seated around Verity's glass patio table, flutes of champagne raised mid-toast. Marjorie wore that navy shawl she only pulled out when she wanted to signal that something was official. Owen's smirk practically leaned out of the photo. Verity, of course, was front and center, head tilted, eyes locked on the camera like it owed her something. There was no caption, no context. But I didn't need any. The last time I got a group photo from family was on my birthday, 5 years ago. It was taken at a Red Lobster. I wasn't even in it. They had gone out without me, and my name came up only because they needed someone to split the bill. This wasn't a celebration. It was a message, a digital performance staged to say, "You're out, we're fine, and we're not waiting. Stay compliant, or be erased." I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to anyone, but I didn't delete it either. I sat with it for a long while, letting the silence around me fill with old echoes that were no longer allowed to live rent-free in my mind. Instead of spiraling, I opened my laptop. 2 minutes later, an email from my bank pinged in. Subject: Suspicious credit activity alert. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked through. There had been an inquiry submitted that morning. A joint loan application, requesting my name as co-signer. I scrolled further. The applicant was Verity. Again. I stood up too quickly, the chair screeching across the floor behind me. My chest burned, not from betrayal, not anymore, but from the absurd confidence it took to attempt this again after everything. I grabbed the phone and called the bank. "I need to revoke all prior authorizations for joint activity with anyone in the Hawthorne or Quinn family," I said, flat and firm. The rep paused. "All of them?" "Yes. Immediately. Lock everything. I'll follow up in writing." She complied, confirming the access blocks while I scribbled my notes. I felt like a surgeon mid-procedure. Precise, clear, detached. The phone buzzed again. Verity. I let it ring. Then Owen. Then Marjorie. I watched the screen, didn't touch it. They weren't calling to explain. They were calling to contain. They wanted my silence, I whispered to myself, not my safety. After a quick breakfast, I moved into phase 2. I opened every account, credit cards, utilities, subscriptions, insurance, and began removing my name from anything tied to them. It was tedious, but with each click, I could feel something lifting. It wasn't just digital housekeeping, it was proof of reclamation. I created a folder on my desktop labeled Boundary Enforcement, Screenshots, Confirmations, Legal Docs, all organized, all time-stamped. Then I drafted an email to my financial advisor instructing them to set up independent oversight, no shared access, no default beneficiaries, no assumed familial inclusion. Everything would now be gated, accountable, clean. The final email went to Ms. Linder, my attorney. Subject line: Formal disengagement process initiation. In the body, I requested a template for a comprehensive family financial boundary agreement. Something enforceable, reviewed, filed. Not to be sent yet. Just written, refined, and ready. I wasn't doing this because I was angry. I was doing it because clarity deserves a frame. By the time the sun dipped below the windows, I was emotionally drained. Not from sadness, but from release. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and sat at the kitchen table with an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. Page after page. Holidays. Graduations. Baby showers. I was in many of them, yes. But always at the edge, cropped out of focus. Holding the camera. Laughing. But never centered. It was like watching someone else's life with my name barely attached. I closed the album, then whispered, I let them define me. Now I redefine my terms. There was a quote I'd clung to in therapy years ago. Maya Angelou had said it first. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I should have believed them at that birthday, at that brunch, at every little moment I told myself it wasn't that deep. But now it was time to believe and to act. It was nearly midnight when another message came through. From Owen. If you're going to play hardball, so will we. Don't say we didn't warn you. I stared at it, fingers still, not with fear, but with purpose. Owen's message was still sitting at the top of my screen when I opened my laptop the next morning. If you're going to play hardball, so will we. Don't say we didn't warn you. I reread it 5 times. Every word was dipped in smugness, but something about the phrasing was desperate. It wasn't strength. It was the bark of a man who knew his grip was slipping. I didn't respond. Instead, I copied the message and pasted it into a document I'd titled Pattern of Coercion. Below it, I added a note. Attempted intimidation following removal from financial access. I printed it, 3-hole punched it, and slid it into the red binder next to similar Just Family exchanges. The accumulation of manipulations read like a legal case file. In my journal, I scribbled a quote that had been echoing in my mind since the night before. Threats are what weak people use when they have no leverage. I closed the cover with purpose. That text wasn't power. It was panic. Before lunch, I sat down and drafted an email to Verity. It wasn't emotional. It was meticulous. A bullet-pointed list, 10 years deep, detailing every dollar I had contributed, every expense I had covered, and every loan I had forgiven. There were itemized categories: home renovations, emergency cash, tuition assistance, dates, amounts, receipts attached as PDFs. The email ended with one line. This is not revenge. It's documentation. Use it as you see fit. It took exactly 8 minutes for my phone to ring. Grace? Marjorie's voice, tight and slightly breathless. What? What is this? A list, I said calmly, sipping tea. You're keeping score now. That's not how families work. Apparently it is, I replied. I just never realized I was playing. There was a long silence followed by the familiar cadence of a guilt trip building momentum. You're going to ruin everything. The family. I'm not ruining anything, I interrupted. I'm just refusing to fund it. She cried, or at least she made the sounds of crying. Then she hung up. That evening, Owen fired back, this time with an email, CC'd to Verity and Marjorie, because of course it was. Grace has always been a problem, it began. She thinks money gives her power. She wants control over all of us, but we don't need her. We never have. I read it once, then again, slower. It stung more than I wanted to admit, not because of the insult, but because part of me still, even now, had held on to a flicker of hope that someone, anyone, in that trio would show decency. They didn't. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded it to Mrs. Linder with a subject line: potential defamation, for review. Then I opened every shared folder, every joint login, every account I had with any of them. And I changed passwords, revoked permissions, locked doors I should have bolted years ago. I updated every privacy setting I could find. Social media, online banking, insurance profiles. I shut every window they'd ever climbed through. And then I paused, because for the first time, I felt light, not free yet, but finally headed in the right direction. When they stop pretending, I whispered to myself, they tell you who they've always been. By midnight, I was sitting at my desk in silence, drafting a document titled Formal Disengagement Notice. It was short. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, I revoke all assumed or verbal permissions related to my personal or financial identity. Any attempt to act on my behalf without written consent will be treated as legal fraud. Grace Quinn. I printed it, signed it, and made 5 copies. Then I contacted my bank and accountant with a brief note. Please flag any incoming requests involving my name, credit history, or legal identity from the following individuals. I listed them plainly. I didn't notify anyone. There would be no warning shot. I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let out a slow, measured breath. Let them come, I whispered. I'll be ready. The house was dark when I finally shut the lights. My phone buzzed once more, just as I was about to set it on silent. It was a voice note, Verity. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice was controlled, tearful in just the right places. We're having a family meeting tomorrow. You're expected to attend. No excuses this time. It wasn't a request, it was a summons, but they had no idea who would show up instead. I arrived 10 minutes early, alone. I parked at the curb in front of Marjorie's house, a modest colonial wrapped in its usual springtime perfection. Azaleas pruned, American flag draped neatly off the porch. The sky was overcast, but warm. I wore black, not mourning, but minimalist. No jewelry, no distractions. Inside, the air buzzed with forced civility. The cousins were already settled, murmuring greetings as I walked in, their eyes darting like birds avoiding eye contact with the predator in the room. I caught Owen standing by the window, checking his watch. Verity moved through the crowd like a hostess at a political fundraiser, passing out manila folders with glossy smiles, her tone brisk but cheerful. Grace, she said, approaching. We've got a folder for you too, just some things to go over. I nodded and accepted it without flinching. Inside were neatly typed pages titled Family Financial Realignment Plan. I flipped through, estate clauses, tax restructuring, power of attorney language, and one final document labeled Confidentiality Agreement. At the top was a family crest I didn't know we had. As I scanned the contents, I noticed the subtle choreography, shoulders turning away, quick glances toward Verity. Everyone already knew what was in these pages. Everyone except me. Verity tapped her water glass, silencing the room. Okay, let's begin. She stood at the head of the dining room table, her stack of notes placed squarely in front of her. Her voice rang out, polished and clear. We're here today to discuss how we, as a family, can preserve what matters: legacy, unity, stability. Some of us have been acting independently, and that's fine. But to protect the family brand, we're asking everyone to reaffirm their loyalty. Someone next to me actually nodded. She continued, This isn't about control. It's about trust, transparency. Grace, I'm sure you can appreciate that. The edge in her tone was thinly veiled, every word chosen like she was reading from a PR manual. I cleared my throat. You want transparency? She paused, smile tightening. Because I brought some of my own. I reached down, unzipped the black leather bag beside me, and placed a thick binder on the table. Its label, in bold marker, Receipts. Murmurs began as I opened it, pulling out folders, one for each adult present. I passed them down the table, page by page. No one made a sound. Each folder, I explained, contains a timeline of financial contributions I've made to this family over the last 12 years. Every Venmo, every loan, every holiday covered, every medical bill paid, every business investment, categorized, dated, verified. I sat back. The silence was thick enough to chew. Verity stiffened, trying to regain her composure. This isn't necessary. I disagree, I said calmly. Because if we're talking about trust and transparency, this is where we start. I stood again, holding up a separate sheet. This, I continued, is a rejection letter from my bank. Dated last week, Verity applied for a joint loan using my name without my consent. Gasps. Verity's face flushed. And this, I said, lifting a second sheet, is confirmation of an unauthorized inquiry from Owen's business account, also tied to my credit. Owen shifted in his seat. You didn't need to go this far, he muttered. And here, I said, laying out the final page, is a summary of my financial contributions, totaling $187,900. No contracts, no signatures, just faith that I wouldn't need protection from my own family. Verity snapped. You're doing this out of spite. I looked directly at her, steady. I'm doing this out of self-respect. The room remained frozen. No one moved. Marjorie looked between us, the color draining from her face. One of the aunts whispered to her daughter, I had no idea it was like this. Verity slammed her palm against the table, standing. This is disgusting. You're tearing us apart. No, I replied. I'm stopping the tearing. What you do with the pieces is up to you. She grabbed her purse. Owen stood, but hesitated a beat longer, then followed. The front door slammed behind them. No one dared speak first. I returned to my seat, folding my hands, letting the silence do what it needed to. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, but I sipped it anyway. Eventually, conversations returned, soft, subdued. Marjorie lingered by the sideboard, looking at nothing in particular. As I stood to leave, she met me at the door. You've made your point, she said, voice low. But I hope you know, you broke something today. I met her eyes without blinking. Maybe it needed breaking. 2 days had passed since I left Marjorie's living room without glancing back. My apartment in Portland felt like the only honest place I knew. No one had called, no missed FaceTimes, just silence, thick and heavy, but oddly comforting. My phone sat on the table beside a half-drunk mug of tea, vibrating only with muted group messages I refused to open. Instead, I stared out the window, watching morning traffic crawl along the street, grateful that I didn't owe anyone an explanation for staying in my robe until noon. I had earned stillness. I wasn't about to give it away. When I finally opened my email, it didn't surprise me to see the subject line from Verity's attorney. Preliminary notice, review of financial claims. There were no greetings, no human pleasantries, just language meant to scare. I didn't read the full body. I simply clicked forward, typed Ms. Linder's name, and hit send. They were louder when I was quiet, I whispered to myself. Now that I've spoken, they avoid the echo. That afternoon, a message came through from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Monica, a former family friend who used to co-host baby showers and send group Christmas cards. Hey Grace, it read. Just checking in. Verity mentioned something about the last family dinner. Said you embarrassed her in front of everyone. Just wanted to hear your side. I didn't bother replying. I took a screenshot, filed it in my narrative control folder, and let it go. Later that day, a neighbor handed me a church bulletin that had mistakenly ended up in my mailbox. I scanned it out of habit and nearly laughed when I reached the bottom. Prayer request for divided homes and sisters who forget their blessings. Subtle, almost impressive. Verity was painting herself as the victim to anyone who would listen. She always did know how to frame a scene. I opened Facebook, typed slowly, carefully. When silence is expected, truth sounds like rebellion. Then I disabled the comments. I wasn't there to argue. I wasn't there to correct anyone. I just needed my words to sit on the record, undisturbed. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. The envelope was familiar. Marjorie's stationery, the one with faded lilac borders and embossed initials. No return address, no note. Just a folded photo and a yellow sticky note. "We missed you at Emma's birthday." I stared at the picture for a long time. There they all were, sitting at a picnic table, balloons in the background, cake mid-cut. Emma in a floral dress, Verity center stage, Marjorie smiling, hand on her shoulder. The same type of gathering I used to bankroll. I slid the photo into a folder labeled Emotional Accounting. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. "They missed my money," I whispered. "Not me." And that was the most freeing truth of all. Later that day, my financial advisor called. "Grace, just wanted to let you know the alert system worked. Someone attempted to open a line of credit using your name again. Denied immediately." I smiled. "Thank you." "For what it's worth," he added, "you've taken all the right steps." I hung up, placed the phone down gently, and grabbed my keys. On the way to my favorite bookstore, I realized I hadn't felt this grounded in years. I bought a leather-bound journal, deep navy, soft to the touch, the kind that looked like it belonged to someone with boundaries. When I got home, I sat at the desk by the window and wrote on the first page, "Day 1, fully mine." That night, just as I was closing my laptop, a new email slid into my inbox. The sender was unfamiliar. No subject, just a message. "I think you should see this. Verity's been lying to more than just you." Attached was a zipped folder labeled Receipts, Anonymous. I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen. It wasn't just what they took from me. It was what they were still hiding. The email sat in my inbox like a live wire. The subject line, "You deserve to know." No name, no pleasantries, just a link. I stared at it for a full 2 minutes, debating whether to open it. My stomach twisted in a way that wasn't entirely fear, but it wasn't trust either. The kind of hesitation you feel when you know something will change you, even if you can't go back. After a cautious scan for malware, I clicked. The folder was titled Verity's Double Life. It contained dozens of files, PDFs, screenshots, spreadsheets, some labeled with dates, others with red flag emojis. The first one I opened was a scanned loan application from 2021. My name, signature line. The handwriting was close to mine, but the slant was wrong. The Y in Quinn curled too neatly. I hadn't signed it. The lender listed was one I'd never used. Heart pounding, I scrolled down. The purpose? Small business loan. Approved. Under additional income sources, Verity had listed a family co-founder, naming me. There it was. In writing. This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a strategy. I opened another file. A wire transfer from Verity's account to something labeled Zane Industries Holdings, $15,000. 3 weeks after I sent her money for medical expenses. Then a folder labeled Chats. Screenshots of messages between Verity and Owen, mocking my naive loyalty, laughing at how easily I agreed to things, how Grace signs before she even reads. Owen had written, "At this rate, she should just hand us the keys." There was one that chilled me more than the rest. A document draft titled, Founding Pitch Deck, Grace Quinn, Co-Founder. I hadn't heard a word about this startup. Not once. It wasn't carelessness. It was choreography. "You didn't just use me," I whispered, staring at the screen. "You erased me." The betrayal didn't hit like a slap. It felt more like the slow tightening of a rope, unnoticed until it choked. I clicked over to my email inbox and searched Verity's name. One caught my eye, dated nearly a year ago. Subject, "Thanks, sis." The body read, "Appreciate you helping out. Would have been stuck without you." Attached was a bank confirmation for a $7,500 transfer I'd made to cover a surprise legal fee. I cross-checked the date. Same day as a new loan application filed under her name, with my credit listed. I sat still for a long time, absorbing the truth, the carefully layered compliments, the soft-spoken manipulations, the gratitude that always came when she needed something buried. Gratitude, I now understood, had been her favorite disguise. I opened a blank document and began typing. List of forged, misused, and hidden financial acts, Grace Quinn. It wasn't a vendetta. It was a forensic report. At the top, I added a summary. 3 forged loan applications, 2019, 2021, 2022, unauthorized credit inquiries, wire transfers masked as shared ventures, reputation exploitation for startup credibility, emotional manipulation via financial dependency. I paused, reread, and then added a sixth. Intentional exclusion from family-led decision-making councils. It was time to decide. Go public, file charges, confront Verity directly. Each option had weight, but I didn't want a storm. I wanted leverage. I compressed the folder, uploaded it to a new encrypted cloud account, and labeled it Truth File. Then I drafted a short message to Miss Bunch Linder. If I ever say the word greenlight, release this folder immediately to our pre-selected press contact and legal liaison. No explanation, no hesitation. I hit send. Then I poured myself a glass of water, sat down on the couch, and closed my eyes. The war wasn't over, but I had built my arsenal. Just as I was turning off my laptop, my phone lit up. A new message from Verity. Her words were concise. We need to talk. I'm willing to make this right. Just don't go too far. Now that I knew how far they'd gone, the only question was, how far would I go? I sat on my balcony that morning, wrapped in a worn sweater that still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The sky above Portland was gray, not in a threatening way, but more like it was unsure how to commit. The email from Verity still sat open on my phone screen. We need to talk. I'm willing to make this right. Just don't go too far. I read it again, slower this time. The line wasn't unfamiliar. Verity always knew how to wrap a warning in a ribbon of concern. Every message from her carried that subtle shape, a peace offering with the edge of a blade. It wasn't guilt, not with her. This was fear of exposure dressed up as familial grace. I picked up my journal, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, When they say, don't go too far, it means you're finally close. And I was. I took a breath, not because I was uncertain, but because I was ready. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and drafted a response email, carefully, intentionally. This isn't about destruction. It's about dignity. I won't go further, but I won't go backward either. I hovered over the send button, then clicked save instead. It wasn't meant for her anyway. I forwarded it to Ms. Linder with the subject line, Record of Intent. An hour later, we were on the phone. You're legally protected, she confirmed. As long as you don't release the truth file without cause, you're on the high ground. Then that's where I'll stay, I said, eyes fixed on the skyline. I didn't need war, but I wasn't interested in reunion. Inside, I felt something click into place, not a hardening, but a definition. I wasn't choosing silence, I was choosing separation. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your decision. Later that evening, a voicemail from Marjorie rolled in. I didn't answer. I already knew the tone before she even spoke. You're still my daughter, her voice said, tremulous but calculated. Don't let pride keep us apart. I stared at my phone, the screen dimming slowly. She'd never called to ask how I was, only to maintain control. So I wrote her a letter. Mom, I still love you, but I no longer accept the role you assigned me. I placed the letter inside a small package, a family heirloom she'd given me years ago, an antique locket she insisted was mine to carry forward. Inside the box, I added a handwritten note. This was never mine to carry. It went out by mail the next morning. That day, I allowed myself to grieve, not for the woman who raised me, but for the mother I had imagined, for the family I kept trying to earn instead of the one I had. And then I let it go. The next day, I made an appointment to update my will. Verity was removed as backup executor, a clean break in black ink. I walked home from the lawyer's office with the kind of lightness that only comes when a hidden weight is finally named and set down. No euphoria, no tears. Just air where pressure used to be. I passed a park I hadn't walked through in years because it reminded me of a picnic we'd had there, the one where Verity told everyone I was too soft for real decisions, while laughing and pouring wine. But this time, I walked through it like it belonged to me, because now it did. That night, Just as I was about to close the curtains, I noticed a white envelope tucked inside my mailbox. No name, no return address. I opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside was a single card, handwritten in firm, neat cursive. I saw what you did, and I want you to know you weren't wrong. There was no signature, just the initials. E.M. The second message arrived just after sunrise. Another anonymous email, another zipped folder. The subject line read, E.M. confirmed. My chest tightened as I downloaded it. I didn't need to wonder who E.M. was, not anymore. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Emery's college email, her financial aid records, her tuition history. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, until the pattern emerged. Verity had redirected thousands of dollars I had earmarked for Emery's scholarship into an account that wasn't Emery's. Funds I had thought were helping her education had been funneled through aliases, shell accounts, reworded deposits. She hadn't just used me. She'd stolen from her own daughter. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Then I heard my father's voice in my memory. A line I hadn't thought of in years, spoken once when I'd been caught lying about a report card. The truth has hands, Grace. It always grabs hold, eventually. It had grabbed me now. There was no more waiting. Silence had served its purpose. I clicked forward. The email and its contents went to Verity, with one simple message. This goes public in 48 hours unless you come clean, fully. She replied in less than 20 minutes. Grace, please. You don't have to do this. Let's talk first. I called her bluff. I gave her one option. Issue a written confession to the family and reimburse every cent misused, directly. No lawyers, no spin. She refused. You're trying to destroy me. No, I wrote back. You did that yourself. I'm just handing you the mirror. The next morning, I sat at my desk, took a deep breath, and sent a full disclosure letter to our extended family and select community leaders, church members, nonprofit boards, Verity clung to for image. I attached everything. No commentary, no apology, just facts. The fallout was immediate. Phone calls were ignored. Texts went unanswered. Church groups quietly removed her from their committees. The local paper, the one she used to volunteer to coordinate charity events for, followed up with quiet inquiries. There was no spectacle, only distance. And the one thing Verity couldn't spin, silence. 2 days later, Emery called me. Her voice cracked before she said a word. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't interrupt. I let her speak. I found the old deposit slips, the ones with your name on them, the scholarship checks you sent. I thought they were from Mom. She told me they were from a school fund. My heart clenched. Emery, I said gently, this ends with me, not with you. I can talk to people, if you need me to. I'll vouch. You don't owe me anything, I cut in. You deserve a future free of this mess. Keep your name out of it. There was a long silence. Then, can we stay in touch? Always. That call became something more than closure. It was my Mo-Neo. My proof that something real could survive the wreckage. The next morning, I walked into my bank and signed the last piece of paperwork that would sever every joint financial tie to my family. Separation clause. Executed. Later that week, I closed on a new property. Quiet, sunlit, paid in full. In my name only. Back home, I sat at my desk and opened the journal I'd started the day I began reclaiming my voice. On a new page, I wrote, Closure isn't peace. It's the door that locks after you've already left. Then I opened the file cabinet, pulled out the first page of my legal independence folder, and framed it. I hung it above my desk like a certificate, not of success, but of sovereignty. That evening, I went for a walk, alone. No destination, no music in my ears, just footsteps, just air. I passed a bench under a tree and smiled. The world had the same problems it had the day before. But I didn't. They called me the family pet. But I wasn't anyone's to claim. I wasn't meant to be caged. Her tears, worth it. My freedom, priceless.